All right, awesome. Thanks for coming, guys. Came here from Boston, Massachusetts. My company paid $3,000 for me to come here round trip to give this talk. So what to them? My name is Joe Sarkisian. I'm from Densecure, which is our brand new, newly branded offshoot. We're a financial company, Wolfen Company. They do auditing and stuff like that. So I like to say we're a security company that's essentially bolted to the side of an audit firm. So it's cool that we got our new brand, Densecure. I've been there for about 4 years. I'm the lead penetration tester there. Got a team of about 5 people. Again, this is I don't think anybody from work's watching, but this is a boring slide. It's just about my parent company, Wolfen Company. A lot of people that work there. If you need audit, whatever, come to us. Ideally, come for a pen test. About us, again, social engineering, advanced security assessments. So just real quick to touch on that. We don't say anything's a red team because most people don't need a red team. They just think they do because it sounds cool. So we call it an advanced security assessment. It's objective and goal-based, right? So that's that. We do threat emulation, but let's talk about why we're here. How many people in this room are pen testers? You got a few hands, okay. How many have had to buy a pen test on behalf of their company? Okay, a few hands. Awesome. All right, so we got an even mix there, okay. So this is going to speak to some of you, hopefully. So I've been there for 4 years, and this entire time we've had this problem of we have a new client. They're not sure what a pen test entails. They've had one in the back, I don't know, a year or two, right? Maybe they're regulated and they have to have it every year, I don't know, whatever it may be. And then they contract with us. And they're like, okay, what's a pen test? Essentially. And it's didn't you have somebody do this for you a year ago? Did they not put you through the paces and tell you how this works, whatever, right? And then so it's almost like we're starting from scratch. And we have to handhold people through this process. And it's we're fine doing that, but we need to get better as an industry, as a security industry, where that starts to be understood when we come in the door, right? It's very important. So it's still poorly understood, right? By practitioners, by clients, by people who aren't even in the industry, obviously. It's just poorly understood. I tell people what I do, and they walk away because they think I'm a criminal, right? That's not what we do. Has serious consequences if you get it wrong, right? False sense of security, for one. There are a lot of vendors in the US. I don't know about UK, EU. I see nod, people yeah, people suck at this. Okay, so there's people doing this that don't actually perform them, the classic vuln scan sold as a penetration test, right? Those things are not synonymous. And we're here because it annoys me and I want to tell you about it. A lot of this tends to lead to the following responses that we get, either during a scope call or an exit meeting after we've given them a report to go through, and it's every single time. But we let you in. So we're secure, right? Because we had to let you in. I'll talk more about that. Or that's not a realistic scenario. Okay. Our MSSP would have stopped you. This is my favorite one. Well, why didn't they? Does everybody know what an MSSP is? I don't know if that's translates. All right, cool. This report does not adequately reflect our environment, okay? But we're tracking that issue. Okay, risk acceptance, awesome. Our report was clean last year. Okay. Why didn't the previous vendor find this? This has no answer. I can't answer this question, but I get asked it a lot. So here's a scenario. Company A's regulators require a pen test annually. At FDIC in America, you have to have a pen test every year, right? The big wigs don't get security at Company A, so there's very little budget to have this done. They look for a cheap vendor, right? There's plenty of those. There are surprisingly tons to choose from at their price point. If you Google penetration testing services, when I do it at home, the top Google result will be $99 penetration test. And I'm okay. And then a lot of the rest of the first page is something similar like that. I'm willing to bet you're not getting a pen test for $99, okay? They picked the one close to the cheapest. Fair. Look at their situation, right? Who wants to guess how this turns out? Dumpster fire. Okay. So they finished the test, and the report looks like this. It's either one of two things. There's no or few findings, right? Or a massive spreadsheet of vulnerabilities that was not tested for, or for validation, right? If you get handed one of these as somebody who's buying a pen test, you didn't get a pen test. You get a vulnerability scan. And they're telling you it was a penetration test, right? And we're going to go over things to look for if you're trying to get if you need to buy a pen test, but I'll just say it right now, The first question you should ask if somebody sold you a penetration test and hands you one of these is, what did you exploit from this list? Show me. And they won't be able to. Now they have either a false sense of security because they have very few, if any, findings, right? Everything's ship-shape, good to go. Or new job openings after you slam the IT department with a massive report that they now have to sift through, and they're not going to get through either that audit year or probably not the one after that. Okay, so it builds up if you're using the wrong vendor over time. So why did this happen? Lack of buy-in from the top, right? The C-level is like, oh God, security is a pain in the ass. Like, this is too expensive, whatever it may be. Like, we see this as a cost center. Lack of budget because the C-levels don't understand why this needs a budget, which leads to a crappy vendor, as we talked about, which leads to poor work, false positives, false negatives, which are even worse, leading to a false sense of security, massive, did I already say that? Or massive, yeah, okay. Massive pile up of unnecessary work, leading to a breach, right? Because you think you're secure, you don't have budget, nobody gets security at your organization, and this is what happens. Uh-oh. Sorry. Surely this won't happen again next time, right? Next time. So, another scenario. Company B's regulators also require an annual pen test. The big ways to understand security there. So there is solid budget. They do research first. And they send RFPs to people that they have researched that have seemingly good track records. This takes time, right? But Company B has people that understand that this is important, and therefore the people who are going to make these decisions and pay for these services have the time necessary to do it right. There are surprisingly very few of these to choose from. In America, there's a company called Secure Ideas. Anybody know who that is? Secure Ideas? Kevin Johnson owns it? Okay. On his, and I love their company for this, I love him for this, on their own webpage, they sell pen tests, right? They do a lot of web app, API, stuff like that, but they also do like social engineering, assume breach, whatever it may be. And on his site, it literally says, if you don't go with us, here are the 7 other people you should buy a penetration test from. And he names like Trusted Sec, Black Hills, like all the, yeah, see, everybody knows those companies. all the good ones, right? I wish he would put us as the 8th, but. And they picked the one that makes sense for them. Cool. Once he gets how this turns out, and I forgot to put a cool meme here after this, so we're just going to have to guess that it went well. So the penetration test finishes, and the report looks like this. Validated useful information, right? So it wasn't just, here's all your scan results, and we'll see you later. It was, here are the things that matter. So like, how many people in here are responsible for like remediating findings? Okay, 2? Okay, wow, all right. I'm going to pick on you guys. I'm going to pick on you guys then. Has this happened to you, where they just slap a spreadsheet in your face? Okay. Good. Does it happen to you in previous life at another company? I can understand. Yeah. So a lot of those scans, if anybody's ever run a vulnerability scan, you'll come back with like stuff that's like critical, high, whatever. Critical would be like, oh my God, you get MS-17010, right? And that's critical, I'll be honest. But some of that stuff in there is like, you might see like Spectre or Meltdown type things in there that like, really? Like, it's critical based on like CVSS or whatever the metric is that they're using. But if I look at that report as a penetration, I'm like, I don't give a crap about that, right? I care about the informational that says that like SMB signing is not enforced, okay? Or SMBv1 is in use, or LLMNR, right? Stuff like that. Now, if somebody just hands you a scan, you're not going to, like, if your SOP, or an SLA rather, in an organization is, we fix criticals within X amount of time, we fix highs, whatever, medium, whatever, they're never getting to informational, which is where the gold is as a pen tester, or as a bad guy, right? So just think about that if you ever end up in this situation where somebody hands you that doc. Anyway, I'll get back to this. So, it proves risk, right? So we're intentionally proving risk. We're showing screenshots. We're saying, I did that. Like, I don't believe you did that. Here's a screenshot showing I did that, right? I did that. That happened in your organization. That was part of the penetration test. Here's why it matters. It helps the company make good budgeting decisions in the future, right? You can say, look, in the report, like, okay, sure, you have a NAC and you have a firewall and you have this, like those things work well. Here's the thing that doesn't. Focus on that. If you need budget, we can help you get budget because we told you you have a problem there, right? You have a hole in your security. So we can help with that. It informs stakeholders of day-to-day staff about weird security issues they won't notice. So that's kind of what I was getting back to, like the vuln scan with like the informationals where like I'm going to pay the most attention as a pen tester or a bad guy. You can kind of re-risk those things to people and say, look, I know that you have to patch and that's part of your SLA, but you should probably pay attention to these other things, right? Fence and depth. And there is no option B, right? Because it went well. Like things went well. There's no other problem here, right? Now company B has a solid point of reference. Their team is bought into the security process, right? Like if you have a good vendor, they're not just going to like, even if they do a good pen test, they're not just going to like slam a report on your desk and walk out the door and never talk to you until next year, right? What they should be doing, if you're buying this type of work, is in a way hand-holding you through remediation. And I don't mean they're like also being paid to come back and fix everything that you found, because then there's a conflict of interest there potentially. But what they are doing is saying, like, here's the recommendation, right? Like, here is what you can do. Like, not quick fix, but like the general idea of what you need to fix. And if you have more questions, like we'll provide you more documentation. We'll tell you like, yeah, I know you want to fix it this way, but there's a reason that that's not going to truly remediate the problem. Like you need to do actually X, Y, and Z as well. So there's, you should be able to pick up the phone 2 weeks later and say, hey, I have a question. I know we already had the exit meeting, but can you answer this? Yeah, I can, right? Like we're not going to bill you because you have a question for 10 minutes of my time. Any company, not just us. And there's less likelihood of a nasty breach. Like, yeah, you're going to probably get, sooner or later, if you're somebody of interest, you're going to have a security issue, you're going to potentially get breached, whatever. Like, there's no magic bullet there, but there's just less likelihood of it being bad, right? So, I am blowing through this talk. It's also the first time I've ever done this talk, so that's why I'm blowing through it. We've kind of talked about this a little bit. Do not shop for the lowest cost provider. Okay, like, again, part of the reason I'm giving this talk is because as part of our pen test, we're sometimes given a prior year report for other, like whatever vendor they went with last time that was cheaper. And oftentimes it'll be just like 20 pages of just a wall of like text. And it's like, about our company, about the people here, about our culture, and it's like there's no executive summary where like somebody who's going to make decisions just look at it and be like, in 2 minutes, tell me what's going on here, and then I can leave and go back to my next meeting, right? It's just fluff. And then you get past the fluff, and then there's no narrative, right? So there's no section that says, we did this, and then we did this, leading to this, and that's a finding, right? And then we did that, and blah, 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 and that like we kind of spidered out here, and we got access to this data, and whatever it may have been, right? There's none of that. There might be, one more time. How many people here have ever received a penetration test report? 5, 6 people? Okay. How often do you get a finding that says like TLS version like 1 is not enforced or enabled, and they have that as like a high risk vulnerability? Has anybody ever seen that? You guys have seen that? Yeah. I mean, it's an important consideration, but it's right. Not. To me, that says they couldn't find anything else. And they're like, make it a high, because we got nothing else for you. That's kind of what you get with the lowest cost providers, right? That's like, we'll scan, we'll do and like we'll poke at like whatever we find, right? Like whatever the scanner tells us, like we'll poke at. If we can't do anything with it, oh well. Look into the vendors you're considering, right? So like take the time to research. Again, when you Google for providers, you're going to find like the first page is going to be taken up by people who paid for like the most Google ads or like however that works. And they have like all of their like super low pricing and all of their like elite hacker speak. And you go to their website and it's like bits and bytes all over the place and, all of the typical jargon and lingo. Look into it. I would say, is anybody else here from the US? Nice. One person. Okay. I don't know. I know that Sygenta, obviously, they do their stuff around the globe. Let Black Hills Trusted Sec do as well, but they're also very expensive, right? Ask for references, right? So, like, if you do the RFP process and you're like, I need a pen test, and you pick, say, 3 places, those places should be able to provide you references, right? So, like, Who have you spoken to that you did a good job for who's willing to allow them to be, who's willing to be reached out to in order to like talk about how that process went for them and kind of what they got out of it, you know, complaints or the good stuff, the bad stuff, whatever. If they don't want to give you references, that should be a red flag. Unless, of course, all they do is work for like the DoD or something like that. And like, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Pay attention to communication. This is big. So let's say you've done the RFP thing, right? And then you're going to have an RFP call, right? So you're going to talk to these people for the first time, like on the phone. You have your stakeholders there, right? If they don't have questions for you about the environment, you know, like what are we looking at here? Like you tell them I need an internal penetration test, and they say, okay, like that's not the end of that conversation, right? There's rules of engagement that have to take place. There's like, okay, what does that environment look like? There have been times where I have not been on one of those calls as a lead pen tester, not in my current job. And I'm not on that call, the work gets sold, I'm now doing the work, and I say, I call the client, or we're going to have like our engagement scope call just to like make sure we're on the same page, like what are we actually doing here? And I realized that nobody from the manager, the partner, or whatever took any notes when they had the RFP call and then sold the work. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing for this client because we didn't have that chain, right? So that needs to happen. Like there needs to be that chain of communication. So questions be like, okay, what do we, like how flat is your network, right? What do you have in the environment? There are times where I've gone in thinking I'm doing an internal pen test and like, we don't have any servers. Like everything's in the cloud. And I'm like, shit. Okay. That changes things. Did they tell you about their process, right? So like, if they don't say, okay, well, based on what you're telling us and what your network looks like, here's like what we think makes the most sense for you, right? If you say, we have this, we have Active Directory, right? We have whatever, X amount of servers, we have workstations, this is out of scope, this is in scope, like whatever, right? And you go, okay. But what about social engineering? And it's like, we asked for an internal pen test. Like, why are we trying to sell social engineering now, right? I mean, it's like, if we know what you want, why are we trying to then, like, bilk you out of more money for something you don't want or maybe don't even need? It's part of the sales process sometimes, but, like, if you're, like, way over here when you're trying to, like, scope these things and sell people things, like, it feels kind of dicey, I guess you could say. But let's say it's the internal pen test. What do they do for that internal pen test? Like, do they just like throw mass scan at your entire network and just hope at like 10 gigabytes a second or something like that, like rate, and just hope for the best, right? You need to know what they're going to do. What kind of tools are they going to use? Are they going to, try to exploit things on business critical systems without telling you first, right? Like if we find an exploit, we think it's valuable or vulnerable, we need to like tell the client before we do it because it could be a problem. Do you know who's performing the work? So who here knows like what, I mean, this is like an American tax thing. Like anybody know what a 1099 is? Contract? So basically I found out recently, talking to other people who've been in the industry far longer than I have, that groups like ours, right? Like, so there's a lot of CPA firms, right? And all of them are like, we do audit, we do tech, whatever. And they're all trying to get into security because it's like really, like you can make a lot of money doing it, right? If you're the firm. So what they'll do is they'll put on their website, we do penetration testing, right? Call us if you need a penetration test, whatever. How many people do you think work for that CPA firm that actually is a penetration tester? Right? I found out that a lot of them are 1099s, which means they are subcontracted out from like God knows where to perform this work. They're not vetted probably, right? They're just like, oh, I do bug bounties and I guess like I'll send my resume to like all of these places and hope somebody bites and will let me do work for them on a contract basis. So if you ask like, okay, who's performing the work? Are they contractors? Like, how does this work? Do you have an in-house team? Whatever it may be. If they're dicey on this question, you should also, like a flag should go up in your mind, right? This is a problem. So yeah, he was saying basically that when I was talking to him, he's like, you guys are one of the only like teams that actually have like a CPA firm that actually has like an actual security team, which I thought was kind of cool. Yeah. So going back to that initial slide that all the reasons like why we have these arguments with clients, right? Well, not arguments, but conversations, let's say. So the "but we let you in" one is always fun. What happened last time before we or some other reputable company came in was, essentially they didn't get in, they didn't get anything, right? They just tried to do an internal pen test, but they couldn't get on the actual network, right? Like they plugged in, but they couldn't get access to the domain. They couldn't really get anything, right? And then they get a clean report. So we or whoever comes in this time and we say, okay, I'm gonna do the same thing, but let's say it's a week-long engagement, right, where you have to do this pen test. If within like a day and a half we can't get access to the domain, we're just gonna ask you for it. Right? Because what are we proving by just beating away at like your phone VLAN, hoping that we're going to get like access to the corporate network or something, right? Like that proves nothing. So if you ask for a user account, right, basic user account, now I'm actually on the domain. Maybe I didn't find anything before I got that domain access, but I can guarantee you I'm going to find things after I get that domain user access. There's way more vulnerabilities within AD than there are in like actual infrastructure, in my opinion, when you're doing corporate internal testing like this. So how many people have heard the term assumed breach? Awesome. Yeah, good. A lot of people, for some reason, in America still don't really understand that concept, and we have to explain it, but that's a good thing. At least we get to explain it. So that's what I'm talking about, is like, assuming somebody got in. Why are we wasting time here where we can show you what will happen if somebody does, right? That's not a realistic scenario. So if the last person scanned and called it a pen test, you're probably right. It's not a realistic scenario. So when I say realistic scenario, like we have this one client where it's a big bank, and every year we come back and they have the same problems. Same stuff every time. I can practically copy paste a report from last year and hand it to them. We don't, but I probably could. And every year the guy goes, but we have a NAC. That's not realistic. You wouldn't have gotten in. How many people know what a NAC is? Okay. What is again, going back to Sygenta and their threat modeling idea, or their threat, like what is your actual threat, whatever scenario? Like Igor from Russia is not going to get on a plane, fly here to your office building in Burlington, Massachusetts. You're not a big bank, by the way. Fly here, social engineer their way through the door, get all the way upstairs to the IT department, walk into your server closet somehow, and plug a device in. Your NAC's going to help you there. But like, how realistic is that scenario, right? That's the one security control they had except for CrowdStrike on endpoints, right? So think of all the holes that if there's only a NAC in CrowdStrike that are not being filled, right? So what's more realistic? Somebody sends a fish and C2 gets established, or credentials get stolen, right? Or MFA is bypassed on the perimeter and they weave their way through, right? That's more realistic. So to tell me you have a NAC, like that's not a realistic scenario, to be honest with you, because it's a one layer of like the onion, right? So we have those conversations a lot because those things weren't explained last time. Our MSSP would have stopped you. Well, did you tell them we were coming? Probably shouldn't have, right? And if not, why didn't they stop us? There's a whole other talk that I'm working on right now that is, do you even know what your MSSPs are doing for you? We have so many scenarios where we go to do a pen test, and we're like, look, this is not a threat modeling exercise. This is not, threat emulation, right? It's a pen test. But I do want to know if you get alerted to some of the things we're doing, because I want to give you credit for it in the report, right? So here's what happens. If they have a NAC, they get alerted when we plug in. Great. If they have CrowdStrike, they get alerted when we try to like dump memory or something like that, right, on an endpoint. They get nothing else, typically, right? So now I have to go back and I'm like, okay, are those all the alerts? And whenever this happens, it's always, show me your alerts. Sure. I get like a 10 megabyte PDF of like every single security event that happened for like that entire week, and they expect me to dig through it. That should be a finding right there, because you don't know how to dig through this and figure out what we were doing. Oftentimes it's, hey, was this you? We got this alert. Like, what's the IP address? Oh. Like, you know what my IP address is. Can you correlate, right? So the point I'm trying to get at is, there's hardly ever good data that they get back from these MSSPs, and I have to ask them, like, okay, well, do you know what's in the contract that you signed? We didn't sign it. We've only been here for 3 years, and this is a 5-year contract, and the guy that signed it left. So we don't even know what he bought. Have you read it? No. Okay. Well, I would have a phone call with them and find out where their sensors are on your network, what they're supposed to be collecting, like what they're ingesting to their SIM, right? What they're supposed to be doing for you, because these are low-hanging fruit items that you should be picking up on, right? Actually, that same bank with the NAC guy, same argument with him every year, because he never picks up on anything we do, right? This report does not adequately reflect our environment. Well, did the last person actually ask you about your environment, right? Did they check in throughout testing the same page you on their findings along the way? So one of the worst things you can do as a pen tester is go in, beat the crap out of somebody's network, not talk to them the whole time, and then have an exit meeting call where you show them the report and go, look at all these criticals. You guys have a massive problem here. And they're like, what? Like, why weren't you talking to us during this process? So we could be like, this is a false positive, and here's why we think so. We have other controls that kind of take precedence over this. So like, maybe you didn't hit that control, but we have it in a production environment. Okay, like, those conversations need to be had. How are we on time? 10 minutes? All right, cool. I stalled well. So. Sure. Yeah. But we're tracking that issue. Again, status meetings should be had to avoid this, right? If they've risk accepted something and I'm telling them it's a critical finding, they're going to be like, our report was clean last year, probably because you're company A. Why didn't the previous vendor find this? Did they have a scope call with you? Did they tell you about their process? And honestly, I can't answer this question, right? When we get this question, I can't answer this question. So, finally, questions to ask the vendor. Do you perform vulnerability scanning during a penetration test? And if so, why? Right? They should be able to answer this question. Do you attempt exploitation of vulnerabilities if you find them? This kind of pairs with the first question, right? You're kind of getting to what is your process, and are you selling me a load of crap as vulnerability scan as a pen test, right? How much do you focus on Active Directory and identity? Because that's like the new perimeter, right? Is identity, right? People are always like, when we're doing external testing, they'll be like, here's my 3 IPs. I'm like, okay, can I include Microsoft 365 and Azure and all that stuff in this? And they're like, oh, yeah. Like, it's always a second thought, right? They're still thinking of it in that traditional, like, I'm going to beat a hole through your firewall type of thing, which is rare. Can we see a sample report? Ideally, they have one they can show you so you know where you're kind of going to get at the end of the process. Again, are they employees or are they contracted out? What kind of ongoing training do testers undergo? Are they allowed to just kind of sit there and like not learn anything new? Right? That's not good. What's your phishing process like? I'm going to harp on this for a hot second. How many people here have had a third party come in and do phish testing / training for them? Were you satisfied with that process? There's a middle finger in the back. That's how happy he was about his process. They always focus on like, oh, X amount of people clicked and X other people entered their credentials. Bad user, right? Like, that's not the way to think about it. The way to think about it is, let's say that person clicked and they realized they did a bad thing. How fast before you got a phone call or an email that said, I messed up, I'm sorry, right? The time to click or time to report after click are entering creds. If they don't realize they did something wrong, then there's user training involved in that. But like, if they know, is there a good culture where they can hit a button, pick up the phone, ideally it's hit a button or forward off to phishing at whoever email address, right? So that somebody can start triaging that issue and find out what's going on. Because the faster you can do that, the faster you can isolate a potential huge problem. So, if you're paying for phishing, ask them that question. All right, that's it. Questions? For a few minutes, I think. Sure. Thank you.
Okay, half this audience is an MSSP. Having been an MSSP myself for a while, one of the frustrations we have since you've got to
No, I want you to.
is the final report, one half the time the pen test firm will purely TLP amber strip. But when you do get a report, it'll be that, hey, we've got X, that's lovely.
Sure.
Timestamps, because if the MSSP owner has failed.
Did you say timestamps?
Yeah. You want timestamps, you want the actual processing thing to do.
Right.
Not just the stuff that triggered, but the steps we didn't see. And that's a massive frustration, because all the time you get just we managed to do this and exploit this, like, brilliant. What was the other stuff? And you can find out where we saw you, where we could have looked earlier.
Right.
Sort of
so seeing the stuff.
Yes, we do catch pen testers.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of that out there.
Yeah.
But there is just
agreed.
That culture to work with MSSPs or work with security departments. Good pen test firms will work with. There's a reluctance to work with MSSPs, which is contrary to our entire philosophy we're all trying to make everybody safer. Because ultimately, if you could make an MSSP slightly better for that one person, you could make them better for all of us.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, actually, to that point, I would love, and I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, you know what? Like, there are times where we've been put on the phone and unexpectedly during a status call, and the MSSP's there. And now I'm forced to be like the guy in the middle that's like, I did it. And then the client's like, well, why didn't the MSSP catch it? Who's on the phone? And I'm like, it's just this awkward thing where I've been put on that phone call. And I want to be like, look, okay, you caught this, you didn't catch that. Can we dig into why? Right? Can we talk to the MSP, be like, do you have rules to detect, I don't know, bloodhound running or, whatever it may be. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's if the client wants you to, it's if the MSSP wants to, it's if there's enough hours. Unfortunately, we go on hours to do that type of thing, right? And it costs money, unfortunately, to do that. But I agree with you 100%. I think that to your point about, if we can help that one customer because we worked back and forth, now we have a detection for X, Y, or Z, right? We wrote a rule, whatever it may be. We've had MSSPs near me that are kind of local, and they're like, yeah, but if we have to change that, we have to change it for everybody. And I'm like, that is the worst thing I have ever heard someone say. Like, yeah, that's the point. Anyone else? Back?
So you're talking about sometimes you can see alerts after the fact, like after you finish the pen test.
Yeah.
How many times do you come across, because this is something that I think about a lot of people don't pay attention to AV. EDR a bit more so, but people, AV, they see sort of a closed loop where something's detected and no one thinks, well, how is Cobalt Strike getting on the server?
Right.
How often if you get to see the alerts, do you see that things were actually detected and nobody
did anything? So I've noticed that a lot of the places we work, like they'll have CrowdStrike, they'll have like Symantec endpoint protection or like whatever, or like, some AV, right? It's like not really heuristic. It's just like, oh, we have a signature for that. Cool. And basically the alerts, interestingly, come from the client's dashboard, like internally. They're not coming from like the MSSP and then down, like phone call to the client and the client's like, hey, was this you? Right? It's usually like, oh, we got this alert. We're not really sure what happened. We think it's you, right? So it's like, again, that goes back to, okay, well, are you paying for the MSSP to ingest everything that comes out of your EDR system, right? And then go back, like through them, back to, like you're paying them to watch your network because it's really hard to watch your network and you don't have the people to do it. So if they don't have what they need to get the job done for you, you should probably get it to them. Like it's kind of that back and forth conversation. But yeah, I mean, it happens a lot, I think. Yeah.
What's your perspective on going to a third party to get that pen test inside or MSSP focus and on you, someone that does do that service?
So are you saying, is it important to hire to perform that testing internally?
Yeah.
As opposed to paying? Yeah. So I think it's very hard for people to get that done because like if they're struggling with a security budget to even get like, I don't know, pay for better MSSP services or like alerting or whatever, right? Like standing up an internal testing team like that is a whole different conversation. And I feel like that's a lot more mature organizations that are able to do that. Oftentimes our clients are like, Steve, that's the security guy over there. Steve does security. And then you talk to Steve, he's like, I do literally everything, and then they've made me do security, right? They don't have the budget necessarily yet in order to have that happen for them, in order like 2 or 3 people to that continuous testing, you know? But ideally, everybody gets there, and then when we come in, we can work with those people, and you know what I mean? Yeah, if we got hired to, like, it might be a situation where they just want, you know, we're not going to tell those guys you're coming, right? Or it might be we want you to work with them so you can kind of show them your process, right? And you can kind of back and forth, and maybe they pick something up.
Would you put your shoes on in your
Oh.
so you put yourself in that category, and because then there's a good in on yourself perfectly, and
Yeah.
would you stick to the red team part?
It's honestly just a sticker. I'm a pen tester, like, I don't consider myself a red teamer, you know what I mean? Like, technically on the spectrum, yeah, probably closer to that side, but I don't consider myself like, yeah, that's all I do. But yeah, more of the red. Up for you.
If you say that, okay, MSSP don't catch you, or maybe some catch, are there, like, I think, like, some controls or detection rules that are the most likely ones to interview or get you for, like, broadly over many cases? What are, like, the best practices?
Are there detections that we would just like bottom floor recommend for everybody? Is that what you mean? So the interesting thing about that is like, we go in and I'm like, okay, I ran from an unmanaged host on your environment. Like, let's say we have Kali Linux up or something like that on your environment. It's not domain joined. It's not a trusted host. It's not part of your asset inventory. I just slam the crap out of your domain controller and all of your workstations with running Bloodhound, right? To find out where everything is in this network. To me, that's like a ground level detection, right? That should be in place across all customers because it happens in the wild. It does happen, right? But you don't really see that. So it's like, do you have to, I've heard sometimes people have to pay extra for that when they're paying for these services, which blows me away. So Bloodhound, enumeration in general, password spraying, it's a domain controller, right? Like there's a big one. Abnormal logins from like certain accounts, right? Just weird SMB traffic, right? Like Kerber roasting, right? Stuff like that. There's good detections for that nowadays. So that stuff, like the typical things that you find a lot of threat actors doing, like those are the ground level things. And I think, where is he? FC could probably give you more. Like this is what you should be doing. I think that's all the time I have. Correct? Cool. Thank you.